Who says you have to marry for love? Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me, as always, is my loving husband, Barrett McNabb.
Hello, everybody.
Well, 4 people were caught running a large-scale marriage scam to get green cards for 600 migrants, per the DOJ. 4 Philippine nationals have been charged in Massachusetts after running a large-scale marriage fraud agency marked to illegal immigrants, authorities said. They said that 50-year-old Marcelito Benitez operated the agency in a brick-and-mortar office in Los Angeles between October 2016 and March of 2022.
Yeah, so these scam marriages were, not only did they get married, but then they also made adjustments to the client's immigration status to show those marriages and charged $20,000 to $35,000 in cash in order to have this go
That's
through.
An expensive wedding.
The agency even produced fake wedding ceremonies. I mean, they had the whole kit and caboodle. They'd have the little archway with a destination background. They'd have their clients hold signs that said just married. They'd take photographs of the you may kiss your bride portion. And I mean, absolutely just a top-notch illegal operation going on in order to have illegal migrants be able to have the possibility of getting green cards because they were married to an American citizen.
Along with orchestrating scam marriages, authorities said that the businesses circumvented U.S. immigration laws by claiming that the migrants had been abused by their American spouses.
Yeah, so let's go into a little bit of context there. So what would go on is the scammers, the person running the business, charging the $20,000 to $35,000, they would coach their clients on how to falsify and pass the immigration interview process to say, yes, no, we are deeply in love. Here's how we met. This is a true love story. But if eventually the American citizen decided to get a little bit of cold feet, then the migrant that is utilizing these services in order to be able to stay here would claim abuse. And then that way it triggers a whole bunch of protections to say I'm being abused by my spouse, and therefore I need protection to stay inside the United States.
So a little bit like asylum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. So, if these American citizens, again, they got cold feet, there would be an opportunity for them to just, the migrants to claim abuse. And it's really difficult for the American citizen to threaten back and say, well, if you do that, then I'll say that this was a sham marriage. Guess what? Everybody goes to jail.
Trouble. Yes.
I mean,
so it would be an interesting conversation. When we got married in Virginia,
right? And
on our paperwork at the courthouse, it asked if we had ever been married before. So I don't know what it's like in other states, but I imagine if they do ask that question, that'd be quite an interesting conversation for when the U.S. citizen gets married later.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously,
remarried later.
They're getting a portion probably of the money. They're definitely not getting $20,000 out of it. I can tell you that the scammers who were operating the business were taking the lion's share of this. But still, it just goes to show that it is just trying to find loopholes in the law in order to work around the legal immigration system. And this just goes along with another similar type scam, which is birth tourism. There's multiple ways this works, but it often is Chinese nationals will get on a vacation or on an airplane, and they are 8 months and 3.5 weeks pregnant, and they will land in Guam and then give birth. Boom. The person is now a U.S. citizen, and they'll load the baby up and go home to China.
Well, wouldn't Guam tip over from all that? Those people coming. If you didn't see last week's episode, check it out.
Yeah, exactly. Georgia congressman was thinking that if you put too many people on Guam, it would tip over, which is pretty hilarious. But still, the same thing in San Francisco. There are Chinese birth hostels where Chinese women that are heavily pregnant will fly into San Francisco, give birth into these hostels, and then all the paperwork's filed. And then again, they're not staying here, they're flying back.
And why wouldn't they stay?
I just can't think of any positive reason why they would not want to stay here, but a negative reason would be so that later on they could be raised by the Chinese Communist Party and be able to come back and say, here's my American passport, let me back in. And it's an easy way for an intelligence operative that is homegrown in China to come back to the United States. And also I could see it as just the backup plan. If they ever decided to leave China, they have an easy way to get back into the United States with their child. But still, I mean, one would think if you want to be an American citizen, why wouldn't you stay? So I could only think of truly nefarious reasons why they would fly back.
Because they could be a good anchor baby.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something that that South American immigrants and not to say South American immigrants. I mean, obviously, this is anybody that comes into the United States and has a baby with the deliberate purpose of creating a U.S. citizen in order to be able to claim various immigration statuses, is that term, is that anchor baby. But still, my feeling is that there is starting to become an appetite to look at the birthright citizenship. The U.S. Department of Justice and the Constitution, obviously with the amendments that allow for birthright citizenship, need to be looked at. And there are a number of presidential candidates right now that said that we need to do an executive order, look at this birthright citizenship and have it be removed. I mean, we have to look back at what the purpose was. The purpose was after the Civil War, when Lincoln freed the slaves. There was a question of whether or not former slaves were citizens, right? And so it needed to be enshrined in the Constitution with an amendment to allow these people to say, yes, they were born here, they're citizens in the United States, and that's what the purpose of it was. The United States is one of the very few countries that have birthright citizenship, and the language could be interpreted because the language says, born to people who are under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. It could be an argument that says, well, if you're a foreign national that's responsible for a different country and a different jurisdiction, you might not apply, right? And so there is language that's being looked at to see about rescinding or taking a look at the Supreme Court looking at ending birthright citizenship. The vast majority of nations in the world, you have to have two parents that are citizens of that country in order to become a citizen. So it's not just because you're born there, you get to be a citizen of that country. Your parents also have to be citizens of that country.
Well, I imagine that would be about as politically popular as Ben Shapiro earlier this week has been attacked online for suggesting that we raise the minimum retirement age and to adjust Social Security, which is a necessary evil, but people care more about getting reelected than actually doing what's good for the country. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, any change that is going to seem as though some right is being taken away, it automatically causes political controversy. But honestly, the United States needs to relook its birthright citizenship, and I can see the argument being made that by coming into the country illegally, you are not subject to the laws of the United States. I mean, oftentimes progressive Democrats will make the argument for you that coming into the United States and crossing the border undetected is not an illegal act. And so if that's true, then are they subject to jurisdiction? So that argument can be flipped on its head. Obviously, it is an illegal act because it violates U.S. code. But still,
why have the immigration laws if that's not going to...
Exactly. So, one of the things that this kind of jogged my memory, and this is just, talking about scam marriages, right? So one of the things that recalled my memory a long time ago when I was an ROTC cadet, I was talking to an enlisted service member, and they were talking about how there are a number of military personnel that are enlisted that get married, and sometimes officers as well, that get married fraudulently in order to move out of the barracks. And so on the by and by, things change a little bit, but typically it's staff sergeant and below, so E6 and below typically live in the barracks, and then once you get married or promoted to E7, oftentimes you can move out of the barracks and get basic allowance for housing, BAH. And so moving into the local economy, getting an apartment, getting a house or whatever it is. And so oftentimes what will happen is you'll get two enlisted soldiers that are below E5 who will get married that have no intention of actually being married. They'll collect the basic allowance for housing and go get off-post housing in a two-bedroom apartment. And they will live completely separate lives. They'll have their own dating going on.
Which adultery in the military is still illegal, isn't it?
You're absolutely
so
right.
Quite a risk.
Yeah. So
for a bigger apartment.
They would be guilty of adultery at the letter of the law. So, but still, it's a scam. So they'll both collect BAH, the basic allowance for housing, and the basic allowance for subsistence as well, and they're pocketing the money and they're having their own lives. Now the problem is people get caught. Obviously people get caught. It's a rumor will eventually happen that, hey, so and so is doing whatever, we saw whatever, and then investigation starts, and then people just get caught. But still, I've also heard of officers doing this as well, getting married, and they both get a high level BAH, and they'll buy a house and they use it as investment income. But in some instances, they actually aren't really married in the eyes of God. They're just on a piece of paper and they have their own lives. And again, that's going to be a problem. So when I looked at this marriage scam, it just kind of, jogged my memory of that conversation that I had long ago. It's sad that it happens because obviously it's a crime. But here we go. We have people that are trying to get around immigration laws fraudulently. And it causes a lot of heartbreak. And you've got an American citizen that's involved in it. They go to jail as well.
That's a huge risk. I imagine that they aren't getting a large portion of that $20,000 to $30,000, and to get divorced later, I mean, if it's contested, it could easily cost more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a headache.
Not worth it. But this the scam ended in 2022.
Right.
So really, people are getting to stay anyways.
Right.
So why bother going through the risk of an illegal marriage now?
Yeah, and also you have all of the waste of time with the investigators, because they're now going to have to look back at each of those 600 marriages, and if the people just absolutely profess, I paid to get this, but we're the exception of we do love each other and we did get married for a real reason. Now you got to go through all these interview process again and try and figure out if it was fraudulent or not. But we saw this article and we wanted to bring it to you.
Well, thank you for joining us on Azimuth Podcast. Stay tuned for these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.